Hey everyone, welcome to Zen and Tech, our weekly podcast focused on centering your inner geek and using technology to help deal with the stresses of your connected life. I'm Renee, and your host for this show is Georgia. Before we begin, I just want to remind you that while Georgia is a therapist, she's not your therapist. Everything said or implied on this episode is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and shouldn't be taken in any way as a replacement for personal, professional care. Hey, Georgia, how's it going?
I'm doing well. I went to Montreal Comic Con, had a lot of fun.
Whoa, was that a de-stressing moment?
Yeah, it was just fun to see people all dressed up and having a good time, not taking themselves too seriously.
It's hard
I
to take
enjoyed
yourself
it.
seriously when you're in like a Princess Peach suit or a Catwoman ensemble.
Or a stormtrooper.
Yeah, or you're rocking the Jabba the Hutt hair.
Exactly.
Nice. So, what have you got for us this week?
Well, this week we're going to talk about our inner monologue, our inner voice, the kind of self-talk that we do to ourselves unconsciously and often relatively negatively.
I'm terrible at that. I can't believe we're going to do this. I'm going to suck really badly at this show. I'm going to feel like a real
Well,
loser.
Well, then this show is exactly for you.
Oh, okay.
If that's already how you feel about it, then you need this show probably. Well, I think all of us do. Like, there's many different personality traits, which will be in 2 shows from now, but that kind of fit into this, negative cycle. Because in the end, that's really important.
And apparently an inner monologue would help me as well. A little
Yeah,
upper brain mediation.
a little bit, a thought before it comes out, which we have to do all the time doing these type of shows live.
So what is a negative thought or a negative inner monologue?
Well, let's start off first with what our inner voice is in itself, and that's the manner in which we interpret our surroundings. And that manner will then lead us to to ascertain what our situation is and should we look negatively, is it good or is it bad? So say that you're on a bridge in traffic, one person can say, hey, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just going to relax, listen to some great music, check out the people around me. You know, I would say, make a phone call, but that would be bad because you're driving. But, relax, and there's nothing I can do about it. Whereas someone else might be in the exact same situation and say, oh my God, I'm trapped, I'm late, I feel angry, I'm not able to deal with this, I'm now feeling scared and panicky, what happens if the bridge breaks? So one set could be, I'm going to do my breathing exercises and relax and chill and enjoy some music. And the other is, this is a horrible experience and I'm traumatized.
So is it fair to
And in
say
the
that
end,
your inner voice is sort of like the narration? Because I'm just trying to like figure this out. It's the narration that we all do for our own lives. It's kind of, because I never really stopped and thought about it, but you do kind of have a conversation going on in your head all the time.
yeah, I would actually say that this is like the soundtrack to your life.
Nice.
So two people are walking down a hallway, and if the music is scary and ominous, you feel scared and ominous. If the music is happy and lighthearted, you're like, this is great and wonderful, I can relax. So this is kind of like you're choosing what type of soundtrack goes with your movie theme.
Either the
And
Superman soundtrack or the Darth Vader march.
yes, do 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 do.
Nice.
And the fact that you realize that you're in control with your own music soundtrack of your life really empowers you to change the manner in which you experience life. Is your cup half full or half empty? It's your power. And we're going to kind of work that so that it works in your benefit.
Well, I guess if you're negative, then your cup is not only half full, but it's broken and the contents are leaking out all over the table.
Yeah, if you have a negative, if you're dealing with a strong negative inner voice, it's it just can really make life seem so much more daunting than it has to be. And that's it's your negative self voice is kind of, it's that talk that you have, but after a while, so it's this guy, it's kind of unconscious. You don't really deal with it, which is why it becomes so divisive. And then after a while, it can actually be like this bully that you can't really see or hear, and it's constantly, dealing with you saying, listen, you suck, that things are horrible, the world is really icky, and you should be scared, and you should be afraid,
You're a
and you should start
failure. You're a
avoiding things, and you
loser.
don't really work at things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it can be really something bad. So, the characteristics are like it's automatic, it's usually unconscious and inner voice, and it's pervasive. It's, we're constantly thinking about things, and it's telling you if it's dangerous, if we should challenge it, if we should, how we should deal with it. And sometimes it's even irrational. Like it's like you walk onto the bridge, you're like, oh my God, this bridge could fall. Well, yeah, the bridge could break, and especially in Montreal, the bridge could definitely break because that happens a lot to us.
Zing.
But there's more chance that we're going to die from a falling coconut than we will statistically from a bridge breaking and falling down to that. So does that actually make any sense at all to be worried about this?
And the funny thing is, if you were watching a movie and someone went through and overlaid the existing narration with this really depressed, negative, mean-sounding, nasty new narrator, you probably wouldn't watch for that long. You'd recognize it and say, "This is a terrible movie. Why am I watching this?"
Yeah, and that's what we have to do. In the end, we have to start to call out our negative voice, like pull the bully from its hiding spot, grab him by the throat and say, "Hey, wait a second here. Why are you doing this? What's happening? And let's change this."
And that's the nice thing about it is you make it sound like because we're actually the narrator, we're the Jim Carrey with the God control to our own lives. We can make that choice. We can decide how we want to be that narrator.
Yes, yes. And it's really important. And this show will probably have to do in two pieces just because it's so important. Like, why do we even do this? Like, why are we always so hard on ourselves? And we'll say, oh, to someone else, you did really well on that speech. Be happy about it. Yet if we do the same speech, we're like, you know what? I wish that I could do better. I thought I could, do a better job about this. It was really horrible. I stuttered once or twice. I, didn't feel as good as I could have when I was doing it. So there's a reason why this has evolved in our species, and in the end, it's for protection. It
Well,
sounds
Georgia,
horrible.
if someone else, like if a colleague or a family member come up to you and said, "Oh boy, your speech sucked. You stammered. You were horrible. You looked all sweet," you'd call them an a-hole, and you'd probably get riled up about it.
Hopefully you would, unless you were someone that was a extreme caregiver, and then you might actually say, "Oh, really? It did," and take it on because your sense of self is so weak. Again, another show. But hopefully you'd be able to say, "Hey, you know what?" Or if you saw someone doing it to someone else, you would say, "Wait a second, why are you doing that to someone? That's completely off." Yet we do it to ourselves all the time.
Yeah, and we don't recognize it.
And we don't call ourselves on about it. And actually, we often think, but we deserve to have this. This is something good for us. No, it's really not. It's there because it's a mode of protection that we become, in the end, if we're, questioning everything and we stay inside our house or, wherever we happen to go out and we don't go out, our chances of living to a ripe old age in some ways increase. We're not driving, we're not doing other things. But we have to ask ourselves, is it really worth living? Is that really a life? Is that how we want to choose to live our life, in a life of fear? And most fear-based decisions are the wrong decisions to make anyways.
Yeah, it's almost like you start putting yourself in a bubble and contracting that bubble because you think it keeps you safe, but really it just keeps you from being in the world.
At a certain level, it'll suffocate you.
Yeah.
When you're not doing things because you're so worried about everything. Yeah, you're not going to end up living really, and that's what we want to deal with. And sometimes the negative thoughts are just kind of hateful thoughts on ourselves. The fear, the failure kinds, and the ones of perfectionism and belief in who we are. And I think that one exists in ourselves in the hope that it will push us to strive for more. Like if we're not pushing ourselves, if we're just accepting that, getting a B is okay, that we won't strive harder next time to get an A. And so we start to kind of kick ourselves in hope to achieve more and to get more so we don't become complacent with ourselves. But in the end, sometimes we end up, kicking ourselves so hard that it ends up being some sort of a ground and pound scene from Fight Club. And, even Fight Club had rules.
So here's my
So,
question to you. How can you, because I will occasionally do something dumb and I'll say, oh, I'm such an idiot, or oh, that was really stupid. How do you separate when you really have a problem with negative thoughts as opposed to the, occasional self-epitaph or epithet or something?
well, the difference between something is its pervasiveness and if it's actually stopping you from doing things. If you start pulling away from activities because of these negative thoughts, so you're so worried about failing that you're not going to worry about that speech, or you're not going to ask that girl out because you're too worried that she's going to say that you're not good enough, or you're not going to go onto that bridge because you're too worried that they're not going to do it. So it depend, all things depend, and when that's kind of how we deal with if you should probably see someone to get your help with something or not, is what's happening with your life. When it starts to damage your life and your bubble becomes smaller, so you're avoiding things, you're not doing things, your self-esteem is dropping, you're feeling bad about yourself where you used to feel really good, that's when you should probably go to see someone and say, you know what, this is a behavior that I need to change. And if you can't change it on your own, go see a specialist.
Now you make a really interesting point there, and I had never thought about that before. But there's a difference between doing something like stubbing your toe and going, you moron, or misplacing something and getting upset with yourself. But you make it sound like preemptive. Like instead of striking out with a girl and saying, oh, you dummy, you shouldn't have said that. You're like, don't even try because you're going to say something stupid because you always, it's sort of like you're stopping yourself from living, not just reacting to life.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that you're going to get rid of all negative thoughts. In some ways, at a small level, at a manageable level, it's okay to say, you know what, I shouldn't have said something mean to that person. I hurt their feelings, and that wasn't okay. That's all right. But then if it keeps on coming back and you can't put it back on the shelf, if that's not enough to make it say, okay, I'm going to put it on the shelf, I'm not going to deal with that now, that's when you have to say, you know what, there's something more happening here. It keeps on replaying in my mind. It's bothering me so much that I can't sleep, I can't eat, I'm not able to interact with people anymore. There's a big difference between the two scenarios.
So you explained why these exist, but why would someone, it seems almost impossible to believe that someone would consciously do this to themselves.
Right. I think that it depends on, there's certain personality types that deal differently with negative thoughts, and there's different types of negative thoughts. So we're going to kind of go through them. The personality types we'll deal with next week, but they're linked to this. So there's various types of negative thoughts, and I'm going to go through the main ones. So some negative thoughts are about worrying, what if statements, and they lead to increased anxiety, negative anxiety. So what if the bridge falls down? What if the ride wasn't fixed properly? What if the plane crashes? What if they hate me? What if I can't remember the speech? What if, etc. So that's kind of a worrying negative thought.
Okay.
Another one would be like critical, judgmental. I'm stupid. I'm a failure. I'm incompetent. I'm ugly. I don't look good in this. I'm old. It's kind of negative to ourselves, and that leads to a critical inner voice, leads to low self-esteem, which is horrible. Then there's the victim-y kind of stuff, which I really don't like this one. I don't like victim-y kind of statements. It bothers my inner soul for sure. Like, I'll never be able to. I can't do this. Nothing works anymore. You don't understand what I'm really going through. It's so much worse than you ever thought it could be, and if they're given suggestions on what to do with things, yeah, but I've tried that. That's not there. You don't really understand. And that leads to depression. And then there's perfectionist. I hear that one all the time. This isn't good enough. You can jump higher, do more, be better. You can't relax because you have to get it done. It's not perfect yet.
I suppose 99% was good enough for you.
Yeah, exactly. But that'll even hurt more to the perfectionist because those 2 damn percent.
Yeah.
And that'll lead to stress and burnout. And then there's, of course, the fear of failure. What if I fail? They won't accept me. What if I get rejected? What if they see I'm a fraud? I'm not worth being part of this group. And that leads to avoidance.
So there's almost a range of different types of negative thoughts. Do people often have mostly one kind or another, or do people have a little bit of all of them?
Usually you have a range, and that means that there'll be ones that you hit more often. So maybe 80% of you is perfectionistic. Some of them are like then a fear of failure, because that goes with perfectionistic, for sure as well. And then you'll have a little bit of a few of the others, but they're minor fears. So your personality would lean more towards a few, and then some things others. So perfectionistic people are often not victimy people. And worrying and victimy usually go together with critical self-esteem. Perfectionistic fear, failure are usually kind of together. So you'll have a little bit of victimy every once in a while. It's okay to have a pity party. But you might be mostly perfectionistic and mostly fear of failure.
Now, you mentioned in a previous show, is this also one of those things where the more you do it, the worse it becomes? Like you become more critical, your world gets smaller, and that makes you even more critical, which again shrinks your world?
Yeah, well, I think that Sock from the chat room mentions a good thing, is that, and deals more with self-esteem, but he's saying that, it depends on the type of failure. He doesn't mind failing at something that he's never done anything at, he's not good at yet. That would be okay. And that's exactly it. If your self-esteem is all in, say, doing a great podcast, if that's where all your self-esteem is in that basket, and you completely fail at doing a podcast, so you've lost that entire basket of self-esteem, that's a huge
Georgia.
hit to ourselves. I was talking about myself.
Oh, okay.
That's a huge hit to who you are as a person. Say that all your self-esteem is put in your looks, and then your looks start to fade. That's a huge basket for you to kind of lose, and that'll hurt a lot. You have your self-esteem that isn't in something that you're doing at all. So say dog grooming. I don't have any self-esteem in dog grooming. If I fail at grooming my dog, I'm like, poor dog. Other dogs are going to make fun of you when you go out. But that's okay. I would be all right with that. So yes, it definitely depends on where you are as well.
So it will feed a cycle though if you stop from doing something because you're fearful of it, then you do less things, you become more critical of the things that you're not doing.
Yeah, it actually feeds the avoidance cycle, which is really, really, really bad. What happens is that you're scared of something, so then you'll do it less because that's a very negative feeling. We don't like feeling fearful, low self-esteem or doing something, so you won't do it because that feeling hurt. And then it will feed into that it's really a bad thing. So I have to avoid it more because it makes me feel really, really bad, which reinforces the fact that it must be a horrible thing. And then I have less skill in it because I'm not doing it. So say it's a social situation, I'm losing skill because I'm not practicing. And then it self-fulfills until it could become almost as bad as a phobia, or it could actually become straight up as a phobia, something that you're not going to do. And that's how something like a fear of heights or spiders or anything else can happen.
Gotcha.
Which is,
So how do you start chipping away at this? How do you stop the slide and get your footing back?
Well, the first thing to do, and this is just the first step in this, is to call out the bully. You want to grab that bully, call him out, and say, you know what, these are the things that I'm saying to myself. And I would say by journaling it if possible. And that can be a really hard thing to do. And if you can't journal it, because it's sometimes hard to look at
just for people who might be new to the show, what do you mean by journaling?
So you would say, at the end of the day, you'd say all the horrible things you said to yourself. You'd write it down. And you'd say, wow, I called myself stupid when I spilled the milk. I said I was incompetent when I started stuttering when I talked to that girl. I said I was a failure when this happened. I said that the bridge might, break when I was stuck in traffic. So anything negative that happens during your day, you kind of call out, you bring it to the surface. Because if it's hidden and left in the unconscious, there is no way that behavior is going to change, and you'll keep on doing it. And people often leave it forever, and you just keep on re-injuring yourself until it can become massively damaging and very difficult.
So you write all this down in the... So first, get yourself a journal. We've mentioned getting something like Evernote before, but you also mentioned before the show, just to get people going, they might even want just a good voice recording app, like a Vlingo or a Nuance, drag and dictate sort of a thing, just so they can actually get it down in the moment when they're doing it, and that they might be surprised because you might forget during the day how often you're doing it.
Yeah, no, it's actually really a good thing, and often people go back and say, "Wow, I can't believe how horrible I was to myself. Why would I do this to who I am as a person?" Again, another cycle of why you would do that. But, it's probably one of the two things that I'd mentioned before. It's often very painful to see, how horrible we can be to ourselves. And also, it's often very difficult to see, where did this voice come from? It came from somewhere. We were not born with a negative voice. We were born with a personality type, which might be more type A or more type B, more laid back or more driven. I need to do things. I have to perform at a certain level. But the negativity is something that we're feeding for a reason. We're getting something. There's some sort of payback to be mean to ourselves.
Yeah.
So what is that payback? Well, until we get to that point, we first have to call out the bully and see, what are we doing to ourselves? What kind of damage is happening? So you'll journal them. And then you categorize them. Are they types of worrying, being critical, being victimy, being perfectionistic, being scared of failing? And then you put them in, and you can kind of see that, and you can make a little pie chart, which is really cute, what type of personality trait you are more. Perfectionistic, fear of failure; victimy, low self-esteem; worrying, perfectionistic. And which is kind of fun and cool to notice who you are as a person, because that is kind of hardwired. It's hard to get rid of, say, perfectionism or fear of failure. It can happen, but it's difficult. So you're usually leaning on there. It's like AA. It's like, I'm a perfectionist
You're accepting it.
and I'm trying to get rid of it, but I'm still, I'm a recovering perfectionist.
181 days without doing something perfect.
Yeah, exactly. I'm working on failing right now.
So you've got the journal, you've written down the negative thoughts, and what was the step two?
Then you're going to categorize them in what type of negative thoughts they are.
Okay.
And you'll notice that, like, the majority will fall into one of the patterns usually.
And is there a step three, or is that to be continued?
There's definitely step threes, but then you kind of have to understand the categories a little more before we disseminate how to break up the negative thoughts, which is actually relatively simple by flipping them, but you need to understand them a little more before you do them. So we'll do that next week.
Okay. So from now, I don't have to be concerned with fixing that I might have called myself a moron. I just got to understand what type of moron I called myself.
Yes, exactly.
Was it a perfectionistic moron, or an avoidance moron, or a worried critical moron, or a victimy moron? Damn it.
Yes. Yeah. You just work on where are you, and then we'll deal with the next step next week.
Do you have any tips on how to get your journaling done? I mean, because it's so convenient to forget. I mean, it's a very annoying, almost disturbing, sometimes borderline terrifying act to actually see all this stuff written down in front of you. It kind of makes it real, something that you could ignore. It brings it right to the front, and it's in your face.
Hey, if you want it to be real, which it's true, and it is scary, and I hope that it's something that you're not happy about doing, and you look at it and you go, damn, this really hurts that I would do this to myself. That's a good thing, actually. If you can, you could use just a regular text file, use it on your iPhone, do it at the end of when you go to sleep, give it to yourself, 10 minutes before you go lie down, write down all of this stuff, get it out from your head. In the end, journaling takes it out from your head, puts it on the paper, and then you can look at it and say, holy hell, what have I been doing to myself? Or use a voice recording application. You can even use just the memo voice taking app on the iPhone and just deal with it that way. But then the next step would be to listen back to it. And wow, 17 files of saying, I suck. And it's in my voice and I'm hearing it. And then you can kind of critically look at that and say, what's happening here? Whose voice is that in? Who used to say this to me? Who made me start to believe this? Whose bullying did I then take and then put it myself and believe? Because really, if you get told enough that your nose is big, well, yeah, if you get told enough that you have a hooked nose, you're going to be like, I have a hooked nose and it's ugly.
People are starting to get my hooked nose. I don't like it about
myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, they must be looking at my hooked nose, or they must be looking at the fact that I break out into, hives when I get nervous. They must see the hives, or they must notice that I stutter when I feel this way. And really, most people don't, but...
Most people are too busy with their problems to worry about yours.
Yeah, we're all about ourselves. Who do you look at first in a picture? Yourself.
And who always looks worse in the picture?
Me.
Yeah.
Always.
Does this have any shades of mental decluttering when you do take it from inside your head and put it on the paper? Have you at least decluttered a little bit?
You've decluttered and you've organized, and that's what it's about. And I think Carolyn from the chat room makes a really good point, and something that people will say a lot. What happens if you really do have an ugly, hooked nose? Well, that'll be the second part to the journaling, is where, one, you call out that you've been hating on yourself, and then two, you have to deal with, is it true? Is it false? And then what do I do about it? So if it's true, maybe you did say something really horrible to someone, then what do you do about it? Say something back to it.
Yeah.
Or if it is something that's like a physical thing, well, yeah, I have this. Other people might have a lazy eye or bad hair or, anything else that they have to deal with. But it's in the end, we all end up raisins. So
We all have
am I
something.
going to really care about that? And then the next part is I'm either going to, I'm going to accept it and say, you know what? Yeah, that's me. But the inside is really where I'm going to be working on managing. And then the other thing is that, if you can't control it, let it go. And that's really hard to do for most of us.
So you mentioned that this was part one of negatives. What made you decide to break this part off as the first part?
Because this part is so very important. And I think that if we went through all of the different personality types and then the journaling of what to do with all the negative emotions, we wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
I would give you so much work to do. And then I think that this makes it one manageable chunk.
Nice.
And even if you don't write it down or journal it like in a voice app, even if you start thinking about the negative thoughts that you're doing this week, next week work when we have like actual journal things that you can write in, you'll be able to know what it is. It's not going to be unmanageable. And again, little steps.
See, I see
we
what
don't
you
have
did
to
there.
pour all the sand into the bowl right away.
You just brought up last week's episode on goal setting, and you made a manageable amount that we could do to challenge ourselves and grow.
Yeah, I did, didn't I?
That was sneaky.
I'm kind of I didn't actually do that
Listening
on
to your own show.
purpose. Yes, yeah.
All right, awesome, Georgia. Where can we find out more about you?
You can find me on the website, www.ZENandTECH.tv, and also on Twitter at GeorgiaTIPB.
Nice. And you are here every Sunday night. I knew it.
Every Sunday night at 10 and, of course, at 9 as well.
Nice. You can find me at Renee Ritchie. You can find both of us at Zen and Tech. We are here, as Georgia said, every Sunday night. And you can reach us by mail. That's right, Georgia. You can reach us by mail. Podcast at ZENandTECH.tv. You can leave a comment on the post when it goes live. We'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love you to tell us, what you're working on, how the show is going. If you have trouble with one of the homeworks, you can always contact us. And, it takes a community to raise a mental child. That's what I say.
It does. We need to support each other.
Absolutely. If you haven't already, please go to iTunes and leave a rating for the show. It encourages iTunes to feature us, and then we can get more listeners, and we can get a bigger community, and we can heal our emotional child faster. Also, please check out mobilenations.com/shows. You can find Zen and Tech there. You can find Super Functional, which is the yin to this show's yang and deals with getting your physical body more functional. You can also find the Mobile Nations show. You can find Iterate on mobile design, iPhone Live, iPad Live, Android Central, WP Central's podcast. It's a slew of great shows. So check that out, mobilenations.com/shows. And we'll see you next week.